Thank you for allowing me to spend a little time with you, and particularly recognizing our fantastic World War II veterans. It's always a pleasure to be here and an honor, really, to not just recognize our veterans, but also have an opportunity to talk with our future leaders of this country who come from the academies and all over. I want to just make a couple of comments and then open it up to questions. Comments, insults, whatever. Whatever you want to talk about. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody in this room to understand that the world's in trouble right now. The world is really dangerously upside down. Our country is in some trouble. We are locked into a dysfunction in our government. We are divided. We are polarized at a time in the world when the world truly needs American leadership. And what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Ukraine, East China Sea, South China Sea, is potentially devastating to the future of the world. The World War II generation, built a world order after they saved the world and this country for democracy. But they built a post-World War II world order based on rules, based on law, based on the common interest of all people, not just the United States. But we built this world order with our friends, with our allies, and it was the common interest that really was the anchor for all these institutions that we built: collective security, NATO, IMF, World Bank, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is now WTO, dozens of international development institutions. And the point was, if we were to avoid a World War III and a nuclear exchange, then we were all going to have to cooperate and make a better world for all of us, where we all could have hope. We all could do better economically, education, every way we measure human advancement. And that worked for 75 years pretty well. Mr. Putin turned that upside down last year when he invaded Ukraine. And the consequences of these actions that are going on today in the world are significant, because what Mr. Putin has done, he's challenged a world order of 75 years. Now, we've had wars, yes, I was in one of them. Many of you have been in some, 20 years of two, our longest wars. But still, we've not had a World War III. We've not had a nuclear exchange. We have more people free in the world today than ever before, more people prosperous, more people better educated, and most important, more people with hope. But that's all being challenged today. And so I bring all of this up to kind of frame, I think, what your lives are about, and especially those here in the audience this morning who devoted their lives to the security of this country, the selfless devotion, and our young leaders who are about to embark on that kind of a lifestyle to ensure that our country remains secure. Because we need to reflect on the realities of what we're dealing with today. We have more opportunities today than ever before, but I suspect our challenges are more complicated than we've ever seen. Artificial intelligence, technology, social media, you know the inventory. And it makes leadership more difficult. And when you have a divided country, when politically we're divided and politics has become almost an absolutism. I'm absolutely right all the time. You're absolutely wrong all the time. So you're an idiot, and you're worse than that. You're disloyal. You're not a real American. you're a rhino or you're a traitor. Democracies can't survive like that, because the essence of a democracy, representative government, is to represent all the people. Each individual has the right to think however they want to think, take a position that they think is right. But in the end, compromise is absolutely essential to move a country forward. And if you take compromise out of representative government, there's only one alternative. That's authoritarian government. And so this conversation is not meant to be a civics lesson or back in high school or college, but just a reflection on what these young people here in the audience are going to be faced with and are faced with now. And what our veterans in this group this morning, especially our World War II veterans, who lived through all of this, have some familiarity with history, and we all need to have more than some familiarity with history, because the old adage about history repeating itself is true. Is true. So with all of that, and at the risk of, as I tell my brothers, my brother Tom turned 75 years old yesterday. I know for some of you that he's just a kid, and I'm the oldest of four boys. My dad was in World War II. He was on a B-24 in the South Pacific for a couple of years. But for all of us who've had the privilege to serve this country in some way, it's really critically important that we understand where we are in the world and where the United States is. And the real question, I think, that we're all going to have to face in its reality, and every now and then our country is asked this question, is it really critically important that the United States lead? Why do we have to lead? Well, the way I answer that is, I don't want my children and grandchildren to grow up in a world where the United States is not leading, because someone else will lead. There will be a vacuum. And most likely that someone else today is China. And I'm not a Chinaphobe at all, but I understand the realities of the world as it is. And if the United States is not leading, somebody else will lead. And that will change our lives. That will totally change our lives. We live in a world of 8 billion global citizens. We've never seen that many people before, ever in the history of the world. We are totally interconnected. All countries are connected. And you look at some of the big overriding threats to mankind. Let's start with climate. Now, you can take any position you want on it. If you can dismiss it, it's not a problem, or you can believe it is a problem, but there is something going on. And that's not a United States problem, or that's not a Chinese problem. That's a global problem. That's a global problem. Pandemic health issues. We just went through one of those, COVID. There'll be more. Affect everybody. If we don't have leadership in the world, if we don't have the United States leading with our allies, with our partners, and by the way, partners and allies maybe are more critical today than they've ever been. They've always been critically important. But as a former Secretary of Defense, I think about the United States, how it's been able to project power. How do we project power? Well, we project power starting with our ability to have bases around the world. That requires friends, that requires allies, that requires partners, so that we can put our submarines and our ships and our planes and our Marines and our men all over the world. And if we had not had those allies, we couldn't project the power we project today. And you don't disconnect your national security from your economy or your trade or your diplomacy. It's all connected. You can't separate them. Foreign policy is about all of those things. It isn't just about diplomacy or foreign policy or what your position is on the Middle East or any other region of the world. It's about all those things, because we in the United States are dependent on countries, as countries are dependent on us. And the more and deeper and better we understand that, especially our young people who are going to lead the world, the more important it is. People who are older, like me, I think our role in the world today is to help prepare our young people. Whatever lessons we learned, mistakes we made, we need to help the next generation, the next couple of generations, do as much and learn as much as they can based on our stumbles and based on what we saw. Not that we have all the answers at all, but that's how it works. I mean, I looked at my dad's generation and other leaders older than me to help me, to give me assurances and prepare me for some of the great opportunities and privileges I had to serve this country. And it's just the same with all of us. It's the same for history. But even more now, I think, because the world is so much more complicated, so much more complicated. With all of that, I still have great confidence and faith in this country. And I was asked yesterday, I was at the University of Virginia at the Darden Center, and someone asked me, what do you think are the greatest strengths that America has? And what are the greatest threats? And I said, well, the greatest strengths, they're not our ships and our missiles and all the hardware. The greatest strengths we have is that we were formed in a very unique way. No other country in the world was formed like we were. And we've benefited from that. We were formed by all kinds of different peoples coming to this country, different religions, different ethnicities, and that has so strengthened us, and it's widened our view of mankind and humanity. That's number one. Number two, we have a constitution. That constitution represents 3 co-equal branches of government. Well, that's critically important as well, so that no one branch of government or one individual ever becomes more powerful than the other two. To preserve democracy and freedom, that is essential, absolutely essential. And I think maybe above everything else, the structure of our country, I go back to the first point, the people. I think most Americans are fair, I think they're decent, and I think they're honest. We've always had a left fringe and a right fringe, but they've never governed this country. They've never had the influence. We've governed our country from the center left or the center right. We've never elected a president who was way left or way right, meaning that in order to govern our country, because it is society, it's our citizenship that decides who our presidents are, our senators are, and anybody else. That's not who Americans are, left or right. I'm asked about President Trump. I don't think Trump was either Republican or Democrat. I think he was an anomaly. I mean, he was a Democrat, he was a Republican, he was a Democrat, he was a Republican. But no president we've ever had has been to the left or the right. And that says something about America for 250 years. And no other country can say that. And I think when you look at the individual values of Americans, and I'm not saying that we're God's chosen few. We'll all find out one day. I'm in no hurry to find out. But the decency that Americans have has always gotten us through among and above every other quality we have. We've still got that, I think. I really do. I am all over the country a lot, colleges, different places, and I still sense that very much. So that's the message I wanted to share with you all this morning. I've said nothing profound. I'm incapable of that, but it's something I feel pretty strongly about and based on my own experiences. And as I've said, the privileges and the opportunities I've had to serve this country in different ways. That's, I think, the most important message I can bring. Last point, I said, I'm often asked, what's the biggest threat to the United States? We've got a lot of threats. But I don't think anyone is overriding, and I don't think it's China. China is a threat. It's a reality. The biggest threat to our country is internal. It's internal, not external. And the sooner we understand that and address that, the better off we're going to be. Because what happens is, and I speak to ambassadors, defense ministers, foreign ministers all the time, people around the world, our strongest allies and friends, and our adversaries, they watch what's going on here in this country very carefully. And when they see us not able to literally function as a society or govern, that tells them there's a weakness to our country and that the days of the United States superiority in leadership are over. I think that's a wrong conclusion to reach, but that's the conclusion they reach, because what they say to me, we can't trust you. We can't count on you anymore like we used to be able to count on you. And we don't want to lose that, because that will have very serious consequences to this country in the future if we lose that trust among peoples of the world. Not everybody trusts us, I get that. But as everybody here this morning knows, the coin of the realm is trust. In personal relationships, business relationships, everything is trust. And if you lose that, you lose it all. So, thank you again for giving me a little time. I'd be glad to respond to any questions or thoughts. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yes. Oh.
Thank you, sir. Cadet Kieran Weldon, VMI, first classman. So earlier you talked about compromise and political division in the country. It's posited throughout history that the pendulum of popular political opinion continues to swing between liberal and conservative perspectives and changes every few decades. Given the unique situation that we're in the information age, and as Gen Z and millennials continue to move into politics, old baby boomers and Gen X move out, do you think that we're going to reach a political stasis, or do you think that the pendulum is going to continue to swing?
It's a good question. I don't think the history of this country is a pendulum swinging between conservatives and liberals. When I was in the Senate, I got to the Senate in 1996, and we had a lot of very strong liberals, like World War II veteran Daniel Patrick Moynihan, brilliant guy, very liberal Democrat. Another World War II veteran, Bob Dole, very conservative. Ted Stevens, Republican, very conservative. So we had conservatives and liberals in different parties, but they got along, and they didn't vilify each other, and they compromised. Ted Kennedy, for example, would be down on the floor 11 o'clock at night screaming about an issue. And he'd walk off the floor of the Senate about midnight, and he'd put his arm around you, and he'd say, okay, all right, what the hell do you need? I mean, let's make this happen. You compromised. You compromise. I mean, Ronald Reagan used to say, if you can get 70% of anything, boy, you run with it. You go with it. But that's the way it should be. I've never met one individual, or certainly a political party, that had all the answers right. Maybe somebody's out there like that, but I've never met them, because nobody is right 100% of the time. We all make mistakes on judgment, make mistakes on a lot of things. We're human. But you learn, and you learn from each other. And in the Senate, I saw it all the time. Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals would learn from each other. You know, you'd sit and say, well, you know, Kennedy has a good point, or Moynihan has a good point, or Dole has a good point. And it makes it better. And the one objective that you have to keep in mind is not you do whatever a president tells you to do, or a political party tells you to do. It's what are we doing to help advance this country, to make this country better, to make it fair. That's the only thing that you should be focused on. And I used to tell my colleagues, and I was often called a rhino, and I was a traitor, and so on and so on. And I would often remind them, we each, and you all, took an oath of office. And the oath of office was not to a president, or a political party, or political philosophy. It was to this country. It was to the Constitution. Pretty simple. And that's a North Star that should guide us all. And so we've always had conservatives and liberals and their ideas. That's good. You want those ideas because it enhances everything. And then you start working toward a compromise to do something. I mean, we haven't passed a budget in this Congress for years. These crazy continuing resolutions. Well, it kills the Defense Department because the big platforms that we've got to commit to, ships and planes, these are long-term. All of you know this. These are long-term projects that require 5, 6, 10 years financing. And when you don't have a budget for a year, that this is what you're going to have, you're doing continuing resolutions like every 2 months or 3 months, and then with the threat of closing government down, that's crazy. It's absolutely it's about as irresponsible as anything that anybody can do. So there's so many factors here that we've got to sober up and just basically govern again. But that takes personal relationships. Last point I would make, just because you disagree with somebody, that doesn't mean that you have to dislike them. I mean, I never thought that I had to go on vacation with any of my colleagues or drive across country with them, but I mean, I actually can say honestly, there wasn't one of my fellow senators that I absolutely disliked. He's a terrible person. And why is he a terrible person? Because he's got a different point of view than me? I mean, come on. That's about as childish and immature as you're going to get. So just because somebody's a Republican or somebody's a Democrat, I mean they're a bad person? Come on. That's not right. That's not right. And so that's the way I'd answer your question on conservatives and liberals.
Next question.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you and I'll come to you. Yeah.
Hold on just a second. We'll get you next. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. Midshipman Kiger Camilo, United States Naval Academy. What do you believe is specifically the military's role in counteracting the current social and political polarization that we are experiencing currently?
Your example of leadership. You are the prime example of selfless leadership in this country. And that's what's more important than anything that you can do or say in your lifetime. What you represent. You ask for nothing, but yet you give everything to the security and future of this country. And that is so powerful. There's nothing more powerful than people witness that, people see that, young people see that. You're a role model. And this country's always had that, fortunately. We've always had that. And I hope we always will.
Right over here. And then we'll go to the back.
Good morning, sir. Midshipman Second Class James Corsi from Miami University and ROTC.
You and a lot of the other speakers that we've heard so far have spoken about some of the issues and problems facing our nation, especially the complexity of them. What would you say is some of the steps we need to take going forward that we can take to resolve some of these problems? Because I think a lot of times we just hear about them, but some direction towards how to solve them would be very appreciated.
Yeah, that's the question. How in the hell do you fix it? I get it. Well, it's not. I don't think there's one answer to it. I mean, it's everything. It's our society. It's our leadership. It's how we treat each other. One thing, for example, just one small thing. After I left the Pentagon, I started a couple of programs at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, where my brother Tom and I both graduated when we came back from Vietnam. And I also started the same programs at University of Chicago. One of them, to address your question, is the Chuck Hagel Public Service Symposium for high school seniors. And it's a day-long symposium for high school seniors to talk to them about, and they have breakout sessions, and we've got all kinds of people who talk with them, about citizenship, about responsibilities of citizenship. What's involved in that? A public service profession, a future in public service. Not just military, but firemen. I've always thought teachers probably are as important a public servants as there are. But these high school seniors get to listen to different professionals in public service. That it's honorable, it's decent, it's a profession you can be proud of. But also connect that with your responsibilities as a citizen. When I was in high school, we used to have civics lessons, civics classes, and I pop into high schools now and then. Most high schools don't have things like that. I mean, so we've got our young people graduating from high school, they don't even know what the hell our government is. Just basically Supreme Court. Difference between the House and the Senate. I mean, 3 co-equal branches of government. I mean, that's very dangerous. So that's one thing that we can do. And by the way, every year I just had it. I was just in Omaha 2 weeks ago, and I always do these in the fall. And every year we get 5, 6 more high schools. I mean, it's very popular, having nothing to do with me. But what I do is I start out in the morning with them, first thing in the morning, and welcome. And then I spend an hour and a half with all of them, just to answer questions. And then they break out and so on and so on. Then I spend an hour and a half with all the teachers at lunch, just the teachers. And it's really an interesting day. But that's one little thing that we can do. But, most Americans know that something's wrong. I mean, you get up in the morning with your own life, and if you're just not right, you know it. You look in the mirror or whatever, you just know things just aren't right. It could be for many reasons. But Americans know when things aren't right, when they know they're off balance. They know things could be better. And it could, jobs, economy, I mean, just so many things, problems, challenges with young people that are out there today that we've never seen anything like it. Social media challenges. Obviously, illegal drugs. But we can't turn away from it. We got to deal with it. And I think it's the same way when we look at our society, our country, and what can we do to change it. But I go back to the answer to the question I gave over here. I don't think there's anything more powerful in our world, in our society, in our country, in our lives, than examples. There's nobody in this room that doesn't admire some people. You admire people for different reasons. But I would bet most people, if not all people in this room, when they look at people, I admire that person very much. Well, why do you admire them? Are they good looking? Are they rich? Or what the hell? What is it? No, you admire them because they are selfless, because they help others, they do things for their community, for others. That's why you admire them. It's pretty simple, really. And so I think we, the citizens, the 340 million citizens of this country, need to take a little more responsibility too. You know, politics doesn't change anything. It just reflects society. Every person here in Washington, in the White House, Congress, they're not here because they were ordained to be president or a senator or something. They're here because the people from where they're from put them there, elected them. So that's where the process begins. And so we've got to take more responsibility, I think, citizens do. And that's one of the reasons I started this program, Public Service Symposium, at the University of Nebraska, at Omaha, and University of Chicago.